Good day, welcome back to video 2 of exam type questions for trigonometric graphs. Trust you enjoyed the previous one and you are ready for more in this one. Our question here tells us that the graph of f of x is equal to sine 3x is drawn below for x an element of negative 90 and 180 degrees. Now, if you look at the graph, you can see that there will be 3 graphs in a cycle of 360 degrees. So, first question that they ask, write down the period of f. Now, the normal period for a sine graph is 360 degrees. Because it is sine 3x, I divide that by 3 and I see that the new period is now 120 degrees. The next question merely asks, write down the solution for sine 3x being negative 1. If I know my rules, here I have negative 1. So over here, sine 3x is negative 1. Over here, sine 3x is negative 1. And the period or the interval that they're talking about is negative 90 and 180. Be very careful of the interval. They could say where x is positive only. But in this case, they want to know from negative 90 up till 180 degrees. How many times will x be negative 1? Where will x, for which values of x will that function be negative 1? So now I write my answer as follows. Graph will be negative 1 where x is equal to negative 30 degrees and positive 90 degrees. The next question, 8.3. Give the maximum value of h if h of x is the function of f of x minus 1. So here they ask maximum. The previous one was minimum. And learners or students normally confuse the two. They ask for the maximum, then they intend to give the maximum, then they give the minimum. So in this function, the maximum is positive 1. So if I subtract 1 from this maximum that is 1, I will have an answer of 0. So I write it as 1 minus 1 is equal to 0. That will be my... The next question they ask me to write or to draw the graph of g of x where it is 3 cos of x for the interval minus 90 degrees and 180 degrees. They also expect of me to draw this graph on the same grid where that function is, and normally they will give you an annexure where you have to draw this graph on the annexure together with this graph. So that information I will type into my calculator and I will calculate the values concerned. Now that I have calculated the values of negative 90 for 3 cos of x, will be 0, 0 degrees will be 3, 90 degrees will be 0, 180 degrees will be minus 3. I plot the values and I draw one continuous curve. Now in question 5, they say use the graph to determine how many solutions there are for the equation sine of 3x divided by 3 minus cos of x is equal to 0 on the interval minus 90 degrees and 180 degrees. So I did not see these graphs, so I definitely will have to do some form of a calculation to see what I am dealing with. So my first port of call is add cos of x on this side, add cos of x on this side, multiply by 3 here, multiply by 3 here, and I see I get the graph of sine 3x is equal to 3 cos of x. Now I see where is this graph equal to that graph. Now I read it from the graph. I see, oh, they are equal over there and they are equal over there. They asked for how many solutions does that? So my answer is there's 2 solutions where these graphs are equal. Justified by the work that you had to do. First I had to write it in that form, that is 1 mark, and the answer is 1 mark. If it had been 4 marks, you would have had to give where those graphs would be equal. And the closest you would get is between minus 90 and minus 60, and also between 90 degrees and 120 degrees. But it was only 2 marks, so do not waste time by giving additional information that they did not ask for. Our last question in this set says, use the graph to solve the following, where the function of f multiply with the function of g will be less than 0. So when we interpret this information, we realize that the product of the 2 graphs must be negative. Less than 0, meaning negative. So that means one graph has to be positive, one graph has to be negative. Or one graph has to be negative and the other one has to be positive. So let's quickly look at when is a graph positive and when is a graph negative. When they speak of a graph being positive or negative, my x-axis will split my positive values, positive y, from my negative y. I hope you understand that very well. So, where will the one graph is positive, meaning above the line, and the other graph is below the line. So let's follow one of the graphs and see what happens. This graph is positive from there to there. So this graph is negative from that point to that point, and then again from this point to this point, because now this graph becomes negative also. And a negative times a negative will be a positive, so there is no solution for that. But the moment that this graph continues above the line over till that point, it will render a negative result if it's multiplied with a negative, because the graph is positive there. This one will be negative, so there is 1, 2, 3 places where there's a solution. So I need to give the value from that point to that point, and then I need to give the value from that point to this point over here, and then from that point to that point. So let's go read from the graph. The first intersection would be at negative 60, 0 degrees, right? From there to there. That's the first one. Then the next one will be from 60 degrees up until 90 degrees. Then the next one will be 120 degrees up till 180 degrees. So all we do now is we write it down, minus 60 degrees to 0 degrees. So x lies between 0 and negative 60 degrees. It does not include those points because any number, positive or negative, multiplied by 0 will give you 0, and 0 is a neutral number. So it excludes 0 and it excludes negative 60 because it is 0 at those 2 points. Then from 60 to 90 degrees, and then 120 to 180 degrees. I trust you enjoyed this type of calculations. They can ask a multitude of questions that speaks of the inequalities. Firstly, I have to understand positive above the line, negative below the line. When I have positive. When is this the two product of the graphs greater than? Then I must know both graphs must be positive or both graphs must be negative. If they ask is the product of these two graphs greater than 0, then it means less than 0, sorry, then it means one has to be plus, one has to be minus, or the other one has to be a plus and the other one has to be a minus. Thank you for watching. We will see you in video 3. If you liked it, tell your friends. If you loved it, share your experience with us. Have a good day further. All the best.